Well, we have a lot of talk radio fans here tonight, do we? In all my years in talk radio, I've had the pleasure of meeting hosts not only here in town, but also all around the nation, and even a few from other countries. And people are always wondering, what are those people like behind the scenes? We hear them on the radio, but what are they really like? I can honestly say tonight that our keynote speaker is not only the most intelligent, but he is genuinely the kindest and most humble of any of the radio talk show hosts I've ever come into contact with. He is a good one, and it's our pleasure to have him here tonight. You hear him weekday afternoons from 2 until 5 on AM 560 WIND. Please help me welcome Michael Medved.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was just thinking a little bit about that lovely words that Cisco Cotto delivered, saying that I was the most humble of talk radio hosts. That's sort of like saying someone's the tallest jockey. This is not a group generally, and I think Cisco can certify this, that is known for its humility. Lot of other virtues, humility not among them. So I'm very appreciative for your generous comments. It's so terrific to be able to be here, and to look forward to coming back to Illinois and coming back to Chicago at a time when the same kind of miracles that have been happening right next door in Wisconsin and in Michigan can actually happen in Springfield. It can happen. It can happen. In the excellent presentation that Dave Smith gave, I was very struck looking at that crowd of people in the state capitol, the homeschoolers who were there to affirm the most basic right imaginable, which is the right of a parent to teach a child, a right established in the Bible, for God's sake. And you look at those thousands of people, and I was immediately thinking, that looks like what went on in Madison, Wisconsin, except there was a difference. The Union thugs in Madison trashed the place, left trash behind, made a mess, made a spectacle of themselves. I guarantee you that those homeschoolers demonstrated the same kind of civility, the same kind of dignity, the same kind of self-control and patriotism that they are trying to pass on to their children. They would be very different from the losers and creeps. Can I say that to a 501c3? Can I say up in Madison, or heaven help us, the Occupy Chicago horde, who are doing such a lovely job of helping ensure that we have a one-term president, which Now let me go from that very directly to mostly what I wanted to speak to you about, because I wanted to be very, very focused tonight, is that tonight I know that many of you are giving up a lot to be here. You're giving up the opportunity, for instance, to hear the 8 Republican candidates for president in their 8th debate. Honest to God, it is the 8th debate so far. And I'm sure some of you will have it recorded. It's TiVoed. You'll be able to see it when you go home. But one of the things that people have in mind right now, we are in the midst of a political season. No one knows exactly when the Iowa caucuses are going to be. The most likely date is January 3rd. That's the latest they could be. They may be pushed before New Year's. They may be pushed to the week, heaven help us all, between Christmas and New Year's. Nothing says holiday cheer like a bunch of negative political ads in Christmas season. I mean, really. Okay, we are in the midst of a presidential campaign. And there is one thing on which every American agrees. Our nation is in desperate shape. And I do not remember a time in my lifetime, which is getting to be a substantial period of time, consider the alternatives, thank God. I do not remember a time in my lifetime where the gloom, the worry, the insecurity, the fear about America and our future has been as universal as it is today. The only time that was close was 1968, when we had the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and we had the assassination of Robert Kennedy, and we had George Wallace getting 13% of votes. And I mean, that was a terrible, terrible year. It was also the year that the Soviet Union occupied Prague. That was a terrible year. This, in 2011, when we look back on it, we will not look back on this year as we just have done in the Jewish community, because our new year, of course, was just 12 days ago. We will not look back on this year as a golden, wonderful, terrific year. I'd like to say that we could, but we can't. Let us hope that the next year is better. And one of the ways that the next year can be better is with a change of leadership next year in Washington, D.C., and in Springfield, Illinois, in the state legislature. But having said that, and talking a little bit about the debate that is going on tonight, one of the things that many people say, including me, is that the best way to ensure a change of leadership is to concentrate on the issue of jobs, of the economy, of the real economic pain and insecurity that so many Americans feel. We have in this country right now, it's over 15 million now people who are formerly unemployed. We have at least 22 million who are either unemployed or underemployed. We have, according to the most recent estimates by our government, over 40 million Americans who live in poverty. And that number has gone up to not the highest percentage ever, but the highest raw number ever in the United States, ever. It's since the government started keeping those statistics. It is a very, very tough time. But I want to say and make very clear to you that I believe that those people who say that, okay, we talk only about the economy and then forget about the social issues, forget about the values issues, forget about issues of the family and of human life, those people are entirely wrong, and let me tell you why. Because those two issues are indissoluble. They are part of the same struggle, and they're part of the same struggle on both sides. The forces that are arrayed that are preventing our economic recovery, the forces that have led to America's economic hard times, are the same as the forces that threaten the family and threaten the values and threaten the moral core of the United States of America. What do I mean? I want to suggest that there are three values issues that must be dealt with before we enjoy the meaningful economic recovery that we all long for in this country. And those issues have to do with family, morality, and confidence. They are cultural issues. They are values issues. But they are necessary issues to address if we are ever going to revive the American economy and revive the American dream, which is that we provide our children with more, not less, in terms of opportunities than we were provided by our parents. It's a terrible thing. This is going around the internet right now, which it's depressing because it's so true. People say, You want your children to live the American dream? Tell them to move to Finland. Because Finland has the kind of economic mobility that America used to have and must have again. Let me talk about each of these issues and the way that the social issue outlook fits together directly with the economic necessities, and why the interests of both issues, both the social issues and the economic issues, are menaced by the same malevolent force of big, intrusive, paralyzing, toxic, destructive government. All right. First, on the issue of family. How many people here either now or have ever run your own business? Okay. Anyone who's run his or her own business knows how important it is economically to have stable families. Anyone notice the difference in people you hire for business between hiring single guys and hiring married guys, right? There's all the difference in the world, by the way, and this is economically demonstrable. There are statistics about this in terms of absenteeism, theft, irresponsible behavior, destructive behavior, traffic accidents. It makes a huge difference when guys get married. There's a great book about this by George Gilder called Naked Nomads, which basically suggests if you look at the crime rate doesn't unite people in terms of any racial category or in terms of any economic category. The people who commit violent crimes are not the poorest of the poor. They have two factors in common. One, virtually all of them have that factor in common. Virtually all people engaged in violent crime are single men, right? They are not married guys. Now, there are exceptions, but they're rare exceptions. And by the way, they are single men who grew up. 70%, they just did this study, 70% of people currently imprisoned for violent criminality grew up in fatherless households. Think about that. We cannot separate the issue of family from the issue of economic vitality. The family has always been not only the major cultural and values and religious unit in American life, it has also been the core of our economy. If you look at the American dream, if you look at the American frontier, it was always a family going out to settle. And by the way, those places like in the California Gold Rush, my wife's great-great-great-grandfather came to the California Gold Rush in 1849. He was a 49er. And it was miserable until women arrived, right? That's what happens. Anyone want to know you need family for economic progress, for building, for success, for civilization. And how does big government menace family? In every way. Most importantly, not just because of the tax burden, which is so punishing on American families. I mean, people worry about the amount of money that the typical American family pays on medical care. They should. And by the way, look how medical care and the cost of medical care have gone up since the enactment of Obamacare, which was supposed to roll back costs, if we remember that. But if you take a look at the costs of all medical care and dental care and everything, it is far less than the typical working class American family pays in taxes of all kinds. And you know the statistics that over 40% of Americans, 47% right now, pay nothing or actually get money back from the income tax system. But see, they don't believe that. Why? Because they're paying payroll taxes, and they're paying Medicare taxes, and they're paying sales taxes. And in Illinois, thank you very much, Governor Quinn, they are paying more and more and more in state income taxes, and local taxes, and property taxes. And when people talk about income tax, only a fraction of what burdens the American family. And when that family unit finds that it is not working for its own children and for its own future. It's working for strangers. It's working for the state. That is paralyzing to family. But even worse is usurping the role of family. It's a terrible thing. One of the things that I believe is one of the most devastating developments in American life. I'm pausing here because I'm thinking, should I speak about something that might be embarrassing to a member of my family? But I will. Our middle daughter just graduated from University of Washington a year ago, June. And she did very well academically, and she was one of the lucky people graduating from college who was able to get a job. She has a job teaching preschool. Where she teaches preschool, they charge more in tuition for the 3-year-olds that she teaches than she had to pay at the University of Washington. And why? Because the parents, literally, the parents drop the children off at 7 in the morning, and most of the parents pick the children up at 6 in the afternoon. My daughter became an expert in toilet training. She's cheerful about it, and she likes it, and she loves working with the little kids. So I asked, how many of the children in your preschool call you mommy? She said all of them. It's an unbelievable situation. And now the government, there is one party, there is one point of view that wants daycare, nursery school to be a right, to be provided by the government. The government right now in the United States of America, most people don't know this, but we should know this. The majority, literally, it's over 60% now, of Americans' children in public schools get either lunch or breakfast or both provided by the federal government. If government is providing services to toilet train kids, to feed them, if government usurps the most basic family role, which is teaching kids, it's unbelievable. They want to stop you from teaching your own kids if you're a homeschooler, and they want to insist on their right to teach your kids the most graphic details about sex education. It's outrageous. If there is one thing that most parents really care about, it's when, and then yes, it can be uncomfortable, but it's important. It's part of being a parent. Being a parent is uncomfortable. God set it up that way. But the truth of the matter is, do you want some teacher who is probably a member of a teachers union and probably isn't as loving and wonderful as my daughter is, right? Do you want some teacher teaching your children about the birds and the bees, as we used to describe it? Or is that a parent's job? This is basic stuff. The biggest force undermining the American family, and it's been this way for years, has been big government. Crushing families with taxes, intruding in family decisions, taking away your right to educate your own child, taking away your right to protect your children's innocence. A few years ago, my wife and I wrote a book together called Saving Childhood, Protecting Our Children from the National Assault on Innocence. And it is criminal that one of the sources of that assault is our schools. And at the other edge of life, the edge of elderly life, I remember my father, may he rest in peace, after he got his first job. I was born when my father was an undergraduate. My father came back from the Navy in World War II, and on the GI Bill, he went to University of Pennsylvania. I was born when my dad was a junior in college. And when my dad finished with his graduate degrees and his PhD, and he got his first full-time job, he was able to buy, for his father, my grandfather, the first house that my grandfather owned, the only house he ever owned, cost $3,000, literally, in South Philadelphia. And it was a crummy house in a slum neighborhood, but he owned a house. How important it was to my father. Nothing made him more proud in his life than buying a home for his father, which he did while we were still renting a basement apartment. I guarantee you there are immigrant families here represented in your background or by you yourself where you have similar stories. But that idea of not only a parent providing for a child, but a child providing for a parent and for a grandparent, and of grandparent, that is basic to America. It's part of family. And when the government comes in and says, never mind, we'll take care of grandma and grandpa, we'll provide their medical care, we'll provide their livelihood, we'll take care of everything, this is one of the reasons that the intergenerational connection in American life has been damaged. Not destroyed, but damaged. Big government has become a force weakening, threatening, interfering with, intruding in the American family. And the American family and its revival are one of the factors that is necessary if we are to have a meaningful economic recovery. And that brings me to the second point. Morality. Morality is necessary for a business recovery. I think people very well understand, even some of those Occupy Wall Street jerks understand, that there was a certain amount of immorality, and not just from Bernie Madoff, but from some of the people who behaved extremely badly and irresponsibly, yes, on Wall Street and in other businesses. I don't think it's true of American business in general. In my book, The 5 Big Lies About American Business, the most recent book, one of the big lies is that most corporate CEOs are corrupt and overpaid. They're certainly not overpaid, and they're certainly not corrupt. Not most. Some are. One of the essential elements for business success is a revision of morality. The understanding that right and wrong matters in business. One of the reasons that America has been able to be the wonder of the world, this economic powerhouse that was built really in nowhere's land. I mean, if you ask somebody in the 1700s to predict what is going to be the powerhouse in the world, no one would have predicted North America. With all of the development, how did we do that? One of the reasons we did that was because we were the most religious country in the world. And we were the country where people could make a deal on a handshake. And we were the country where in many smaller towns and smaller communities, if you got into some kind of business dispute, you could go to the local pastor, or you could go to the local priest or rabbi, and you could have it resolved. Morality and the idea that you owe your employees a decent wage. It's in the Bible. The idea that you need to pay them on time. It's in the Bible. The idea that you need to work honorably and honestly. These are essential elements for economic success. They've always been part of the American economic success. And if you look at people who are called the robber barons, right? I hate that phrase. I had someone use it on the show today. And one of the things that I could interrupt people all the time on the air. I'm trying not to. Try to let them talk. You know, Mark Twain once said, I could either interrupt you and answer you and convince some of the people who hear me that you're an idiot, or I could simply let you talk and remove all doubt. I'm trying to follow at least a little bit more the latter course. But the truth is, someone used the phrase robber barons. Those so-called robber barons were people like Andrew Carnegie, who gave away virtually his entire fortune. Do you know he built 3,200 libraries all around the United States? Anybody here ever been to a community where you've seen a Carnegie library? Yeah, they're all of, and Carnegie Hall, and Carnegie Mellon University. And if you take a look at what the robber barons did and who they were, they didn't rob from anyone. They robbed from their families to some extent because they gave so much time to building businesses and building industry. But morality is an essential element of American business success. It always has been. But it has to be a morality based on what is right versus what is wrong, not based on what is legal versus what is illegal. Because for some of those miscreants in Wall Street, they haven't been arrested because maybe what they did wasn't legal, but it wasn't right. And we know that it wasn't right. And to renew America and to have the kind of recovery, the kind of surge that we had in this country, and we had it in the 1980s under the leadership of Ronald Reagan, may his memory be a blessing. We had that kind of surge partially because we also had a surge in morality. You look at the numbers, and everything turned around. Crime rate, divorce rate. Divorce rate in the United States has gone down every year since 1982. It has. And may it continue. But restoring American morality is an essential element in our economy, and that means less of a role for big government, because big government says we determine what's right and wrong. We replace what's right and wrong by what's legal and illegal. We replace conscience with lawyers. And I don't want to offend anybody here or cast imprecations against your livelihood. There are too many lawyers in the United States. I mean, we have 6% of the world's population and almost 70% of the world's lawyers. Right? I mean, we do need some new additions in America in terms of high-tech know-how and engineering and entrepreneurship, not so much in terms of more lawyers. Tort reform, litigation reform, all of that involves and requires more of a sense of morality. A sense that people do not have to be watched by a cop or a bureaucrat because they know they are being watched by God Almighty. And that sort of revival also means that you cannot have a government or a political force in this country that is saying to people that what you know in your gut to be immoral really is moral and deserves protection. Jerry Brown, the governor of California, I always feel like I'm going through some kind of weird deja vu to say Jerry Brown, governor of California. He was governor of California when I was a kid. And he's back, he looks like the crypt keeper. And, okay, he just signed yesterday. Or, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm sure it's coming soon to Illinois, because Governor Quinn, I'm sure, takes his inspiration from leaders like Governor Brown. He signed 2 bills providing the most sweeping protection for transgendered people in the country. Now look, I am full of compassion. Obviously, someone in that situation deserves compassion. But now to have these bills that basically would criminalize even what I'm saying right now. You cannot change your sex. You can mutilate yourself, and people do, and they are now trying to do it on Medicaid, right? On government-funded self-mutilation. But you cannot change your sex. And the idea that somehow this is now going to be a protected class in the nation's largest state. And by the way, these bills guarantee your right, repeat, right to change the gender on your birth certificate, to change the gender on your driver's license. Meanwhile, every cell on your body has DNA that says you are the gender with which you were born and with which God shaped you. But part of the way that big government interferes with morality is telling people that what they know to be wrong is actually right and beautiful and worthy of defense. And part of the interference of morality by big government is by saying that we are going to reward bad behavior that every American knows to be bad, and we're going to punish good behavior that every American knows to be good. When people like those demonstrators, and like most of the members of one particular political party, regularly say that we need to punish the rich, we need to go after the rich, what are you doing? Doesn't every American want to get rich? Don't we want Americans to behave like rich people? How do rich people behave? Number one thing, my immigrant grandmother told me this, right? Don't spend more than you make. And by the way, get that message in Springfield too. So we are now being told that people who work and scrimp and toil and build businesses and work 60 and 70 hours a week, that those people deserve to be punished, and people who are out defecating in public places and marching around with signs, what a great formula for getting ahead financially. We're going to camp out in Zuccotti Park across from Wall Street for 3 weeks. What a recipe for success. That people who do that are going to be rewarded. You're going to transfer money from good behavior to behavior that is destructive and known to be destructive. When government becomes the source of morality, the morality that is necessary for business revival is crushed and destroyed and bent beyond recognition. And that brings me to the third cultural issue, required for a real business revival in the United States. And that's confidence. I was talking about Andrew Carnegie before. Carnegie said a beautiful thing. He was very poor. He came over as an immigrant from Scotland, and then his father died, and he had to take care of his mother and a bunch of younger brothers, and he began working full-time when he was 11. And all his life, at the end of his life, he wrote an article for Century magazine called My First Dollar, because he had always kept the first dollar he ever earned at age 11. And he wrote in this article, he said, that dollar was so important to me. Not because it meant so much to my family, though it meant a lot to my family at the time, and to my mother and to my brothers, but that dollar was so important to me because it was a sign that I had been able to do something that was valuable to someone else, that made a difference to someone else. And that helped to provide this individual with the confidence that's necessary for business activity. Unless you are willing to take risks, unless you have some faith, unless you have a crazy dream and you want to fulfill that crazy dream, you don't become an entrepreneur. You don't launch a business. You know the statistics, most new businesses fail. And there are people in this country who start new businesses and it fails, the next new business fails, and the next new business fails, and then the next new business finally catches on and creates jobs for hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people. That's what's necessary for business success, is a little bit of confidence. The confidence to risk your time, the confidence to risk and invest your money. Right now, there's no confidence in America. And that's what's killing us as a country. Part of that comes from the left and from a president of the United States going around the world apologizing for the United States of America that has blessed the world so prodigiously, suggesting that we should learn from other countries rather than teach other countries what is right and what is decent and what is beautiful and what is American. This is part of what is destroying the confidence in this country. And part of the confidence in this country is ineluctably destroyed by big government. Let me tell you why. For big government to continue to expand and to expand and to expand and to justify its very existence, they have to make the public feel helpless. They have to convince you that you can't take care of yourself. You need them. They have to convince you that the problem that you're experiencing is not based on you, that it can't be based upon your changing your behavior. By the way, Herman Cain was exactly right. And by the way, this is not an endorsement, but I think he's a great guy. But Herman Cain was exactly right when he told those demonstrators, don't blame Wall Street, blame yourself. That wasn't simply saying that you are blameworthy or to blame. It is that if you want to get better, you blame yourself, you change yourself. You don't put the blame on someone else. You can't control Wall Street. You can control yourself. That is the American ideal. And big government depends on destroying that ideal, making people feel that they can control anything, that I need the government to provide preschool for me. I need the government to teach me about sex. I need the government to feed me breakfast and lunch and soon dinner. By the way, do you know the federal government, they invested $46 million in this new program to provide free food for students over the summertime when they weren't in school because they might be hungry. Big government needs this hoax about American hunger. Thomas Sowell, who came from a very humble background, African-American background in Washington, D.C., but parents with values and with pride and with dynamism, who helped to create, in Thomas Sowell, one of the greatest economists in American history. Thomas Sowell just wrote about the hunger hoax. Why is the hunger hoax there? So we can justify spending the literally billions of dollars that we spend every single year. We spend every year almost 5 times as much as we spend on equipment and the cost of running that equipment in all of our military on food stamps, what is now called SNAP. The Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. Do you know how many people get SNAP? It's almost doubled. It's 46 million Americans get food stamps. A lot of people in graduate school can now get food stamps. When the government convinces you that you are helpless without the government, that you can't do anything without the government, that you can't control your own weight, that you can't exercise properly, there have to be government programs for all of this, of course it undermines confidence in our country. When the government teaches you that America is a guilty country, guilty, 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 this is what the 10 big lies about America is about, that this country is uniquely deserving of apology, requiring apology, of course it erodes confidence. And without confidence, there can be no business recovery. If Americans feel that the nation is in decline, if Americans believe they are helpless without government, obviously we do not have then the energy, or to use a pointed word, the faith that is necessary to build businesses and to recover economically. Talked about 3 areas in which big government undermines the values that are needed for economic recovery, in which big government aids the forces of social erosion. What do we do to restore those values? I just mentioned the word faith. A friend of mine who I'm going to have the opportunity of seeing again in the Jewish holiday that begins tomorrow night. Tomorrow night begins the Feast of Booths, the Sukkot holiday, which is a major, major holiday for religious Jewish people. And my friend, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, says it very well. He says, people will either worship the big G, God, or they will end up worshiping the little g, government. And if you want to understand what is necessary to revive those values that big government erodes, it's less government and more God. When you talk about the family, the idea that the family is irrelevant, do you know that in most states in the Union, over 40 states, there are now laws that make it illegal for you to discriminate based on family status? You cannot say that I will not rent to a couple that is living out of wedlock. You probably remember, it wasn't that long ago, 40 years ago. It would be unthinkable to apply to rent in most places if you were what people used to call shacking up. Today, you are not allowed to discriminate. You're not allowed to discriminate. There is all the difference in the world between a recognition that you are involved in a permanent partnership, not just with your wife or with your husband, but you are involved in a permanent partnership with God Almighty, who has commanded this relationship and honors this relationship. This makes a difference in every marriage. In Jewish tradition, we say that under the wedding canopy, there are always three parties. And it's not the bride and the groom and the rabbi. It's the bride and the groom and the Almighty. Because there must be three parties to a family. We want to revive the spirit of family and the importance of family in driving an economic revival. We need to return to the idea that marriage is not just a lifestyle choice. It is a sacrament if you're Catholic, or it's a mitzvah, a commandment if you're Jewish. Nothing more important that we will leave behind than what we do as husbands and as wives and as fathers and as mothers. And that idea and the reintroduction of godliness into the entire notion of family and marriage is part of the economic revival, not just the cultural revival. And that brings me to the idea of morality. The idea of morality, that there is such a thing as ultimate right and wrong, requires that you get your sense of right and wrong from somewhere other than the code book. Do you know, I just looked this up. Anybody know how many pages we have right now in the IRS code? 70,000. Single-spaced. 70,000 pages. You cannot look to statute books. You cannot look to lawyers as a source for morality. Morality comes from He who is watching us even when we don't know or remember we're being watched. And the idea of human beings making moral judgments only becomes dynamic and forceful when we understand that we are being morally judged. Not by our fellow human beings, not by some EEOC officer in Washington, D.C., not by some OSHA bureaucrat here in Illinois, but we are being judged by a more merciful but far more righteous source of judgment. And finally, on that idea of confidence, it makes all the difference in the world to our personal confidence and to our confidence as a nation if we understand that God formed us. We did not come into this world by accident. We were formed by the hand of God, and that God's role in shaping the United States of America is undeniable to anyone who has studied American history with an open mind. I've spoken about this a lot. I'm hoping that my next book is going to be about that subject. But when it comes to God forming us, this is why the human life issue, this is why the abortion issue is so critical. The materialists who believe that abortion is a, quote, human right, believe that what human beings are is a collection of random cells and chemicals that have almost no worth other than what you could melt those chemicals down and the organs you could use for organ donors and for transplants. They don't understand that that human being has a soul. For people who say that the unborn are not human life, there's a writer, Israeli-born writer actually, named Yuval Levin, who actually says it very, very well. Not human life? Okay, look at the DNA from even the youngest fetus. I hate the term fetus. You only call a baby a fetus when you're about to kill it. That's basically the rule. When that baby is just days old, you can take the DNA and it's full human DNA. It is human. What is it? Is it a bird? No. Is it a plane? No. It could be Superman. Could be. And by the way, when it comes to the value of that human life, and yes, it's alive because it has a beating heart, and it will remain alive and go through other stages in life until something happens to stop it. But when you're dealing with that baby, and you're thinking, well, yes, it could be Superman, I was blown away on the airplane today. Flying here to Chicago to do my show and then to do this, I read the story of Steve Jobs' father. And this is the most powerful pro-life story you can imagine. Steve Jobs' father was a jerk, is a jerk, he's alive. And he bears an uncanny resemblance to Barack Obama's father. Really. Both of them graduate students, both came to America, got PhDs. Actually, Barack Obama's father only finished his master's degree and then went back to Kenya. But Steve Jobs' father was Syrian, came here to the United States, got educated in our universities, got involved with this very young woman, a much younger student. She became pregnant. She had the baby, and he wanted no part of it. And she gave the baby up for adoption. It was 1955. I was reading the story, and I couldn't help thinking, if this had been 1975, after Roe v. Wade, you wouldn't have that iPad, you wouldn't have that iPhone, we wouldn't have had Steve Jobs. Of course she would have gotten an abortion with abortion on demand, and this human life wouldn't have come into the world. The incalculable value, soul, possibility of every human being created in the image of God, not through some random process, not through some collision of chemicals, but through an active divine will. That's the ultimate source of confidence. That's the confidence that allows people to succeed in business. Years ago, more than 100 years ago, a great German sociologist, founder of modern sociology, Max Weber, wrote Protestantism and the Spirit of Capitalism, in which he talked about religious faith is necessary for business unless you believe that you have some kind of divine creative capacity, that you are created in God's image and God is by his very essence a creator God. I love the old Catholic hymn, and I think I'm permitted as a Jewish boy. Veni Creator Spiritus, come Creator Spirit. That's what God is. That's how he shaped us in his image. So let us go forward with that recognition, with the confidence that no, we are not an accident, no, we are not victims, no, we are not downtrodden. We are the children of God, and above all, we are Americans, and proud to restore and renew this greatest nation on God's green earth. Thank you very, very much.